Cruise ship/hotel workers. What is something you aren't allowed to share? The staff on most all cruise lines are not trained nearly well enough to handle an abandoned ship situation. It would be chaos if it were to happen on a large vessel. The safety briefing you go to is just theater, and we want to be there even less than you do. Norovirus is way more common on ships than you would think. Security staff on ships are poorly equipped to handle a major security breach like an active shooter situation. The words "Bright Star" over the PA indicates a medical emergency is happening and is a page for medical staff to respond. The captain earns bonuses for saving fuel. Leaving port early or arriving late means the ship can go slower and conserve fuel, which means more money for the captain. This is pretty concerning. The lack of proper training for staff in emergencies does seem risky, especially on larger ships. It's interesting how common norovirus is too. It's not something you often hear about. The security aspect is also worrying, especially regarding serious incidents. And the captain's fuel-saving bonuses? That sounds like a conflict of interest when safety should be the priority. Overall, not the most reassuring situation. /u/PixieLix had some great insights into what goes on below the decks on a cruise ship the last time this was asked. I am a cruise ship worker. First one is, we don't want you to know that we actually have more fun than the guests. Sure, we'll work the big white hot party that you're all going to, but once we finish our shift, all hell is breaking loose in the crew bar. Just below and to the sides of where you are sleeping, there are crew members having sex, smoking, and drinking. Our beers are $1. No drugs or spirits, though. We also don't want you to know that all those funny jokes we tell you at bingo? Yeah, same ones are said every single cruise. That really funny answer you gave us about your wife during the Happy Couples game? Heard it. It was said last cruise and the one before that. And the one before that, we are not allowed to fuck the passengers. But we do know all the nooks and crannies the cameras don't reach. There are morgues below deck and a jail cell. We get at least 3 deaths on board a month. So people go on a cruise to die. No, I do not know where Jack/Rose is. They're not real people. This gives a pretty interesting look at life behind the scenes on a cruise ship. It sounds like the crew has their own wild parties and routines that guests never see. The bit about the jokes being repeated every cruise is kind of funny, but also a bit sad. The mention of morgues and deaths is a bit unsettling too. Overall, it's a real contrast to the vacation vibe that most people think of. Yeah, I can finally answer this. I work at an upscale resort. Nights average $500 a night. I work in the entertainment department, meaning we help with both the daycare center and with large groups in-house that companies host. I will say that our child daycare is pretty safe. The only sketchy thing I would say is that we will always tell you that your kid had a good time, regardless if they had been crying up until just before you got there. Parents leave their numbers with us to call if the kid wants to go home, but whenever a kid complains that they want to go home, we do everything in our power to make sure that they stay, $'cause $. Also, the in-group activities that we do, biking, hiking, etc., are sometimes made up on the spot, since the entertainment department decided not to properly train us in all of our offered activities. Newer staff, generally the people that only work summers, are told the morning of that they're running a certain activity and given a really vague rundown of how it's supposed to go and told to do their best to make stuff up but make sure it sounds good. Companies pay thousands of dollars for these activities, but I can assure you the thought that goes into these activities is essentially zero. It sounds like a mixed bag at that resort. On one hand, it would be nice to work in a fun environment. On the other, the way they handle kids could be concerning. Not letting them go home when they're upset isn't great, but it makes sense from a business perspective. The lack of training for activities is also pretty sketchy. It seems like a place focused more on profit than quality. Hotelier here. I worked in numerous luxury 5-star properties worldwide. You will be shocked if you know the food quality in buffets. I've seen yellow food coloring added and labeled as saffron sauce. Pan-fried sea bass? Huh. It's pan-fried white fish that comes in generic bags labeled white fish. People change the expiration date on stuff so that the food cost doesn't increase. The amount of frozen food sold and labeled as fresh is astounding. A la carte food tends to have much better quality. It sounds like you've seen a lot behind the scenes in the hotel industry. It's interesting how some places cut corners to save costs, even when it comes to food quality. Those buffet options can be a real gamble. It's a reminder to check the menu and go for the dishes that are a la carte. They might actually be worth it. I'm a front desk manager at a hotel. I want to jump in and say something before this gets real big. When this kind of thread pops up, someone always says that the front desk GSA can upgrade or change rates for a guest if the guest is nice to them/tips them. While this may happen sometimes, it is not common. If one of my employees gave someone a cheapo rate, he has to explain why. It will come up in our reports. That being said, hotels are a ton of fun. I can't think of any big secrets, but I will say this. If you have any questions or requests, no matter how stupid or weird, let the staff know. We love to help people. That's why we went into the industry. And it makes it a lot better for both the guest and the staff when we can help you while you're still in the hotel and not when you're calling corporate after checkout to complain. It's interesting to hear your perspective on the front desk. I get that the whole upgrade thing is not as common as people think. Makes sense that employees have to justify their rates. It's cool to see you encouraging guests to ask questions too. Seems like communication really makes a difference in their stay. Having a good relationship with staff could definitely improve the experience overall. At IHG hotels, that is Holiday Inn, Staybridge Suites, Crown Plaza, etc. If you say you're there for a funeral/death, and you ask for the bereavement rate, it's close to 50% off. We also weren't allowed to mention it exists, or give the rate unless directly asked for it by a guest checking in. Something else we hid from guests. Generally, when a guest booked a room from a third-party company, Orbitz, Booking, Expedia, they typically paid more. Our managers had us go out of our way to hide that from guests. Lastly, if a guest came into the hotel that didn't fit their ideal guest, that is, tattoos, tattered clothes, etc., we were instructed to quote a much higher room price. And if they decided to stay, to actually charge them this inflated price. This story about hotel policies is interesting. It's kind of surprising how they handle bereavement rates and third-party bookings. It seems like they prioritize profit over honesty, especially when it comes to pricing based on appearances. It raises questions about fairness and transparency in the hospitality industry. I work as a longshoreman at a cruise ship terminal. More people die on cruises than you realize, mostly old people. Norovirus is very common, but more during flu season. Crew member go missing, often hitching a free ride to NYC. Rare occasion your luggage will fall in the water being loaded onto the ship. The ship will give you a very shitty refund for your loss of luggage. And if you're going to a berth with more than one ship dock, make sure you know what ship you're going on. Idiots tend to let their luggage get on the wrong ship and have a lovely week without it. Word of advice, if you're getting on a cruise ship in NYC, if your ship leaves at 4 o'clock, get there at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. You will avoid the crowds and the check-in lines, and your luggage will be attended to right away. Seems like working at a cruise terminal comes with a lot of strange stories. Deaths and norovirus are definitely concerning. It's interesting how people can just disappear or mess up luggage so easily. It's good advice about getting there early too, probably saves a lot of hassle. Overall, it's a mix of unpredictability and routine that seems kind of typical for that kind of job. Kind of late, but I actually for once have a relevant comment, laughing face. I worked at Holiday Inn Express for a little bit. Spread a towel out on the counter before putting your stuff on it, because I know some of my coworkers would go from floor to shower to toilet to sink with the same rag. We typically get 10 rags a day to clean. They're color-coded to match the cleaner they're used with. Bathroom is pink, window/glass is blue, dusting solution is yellow, and we use 2 or 3 per room. If you have 15 rooms, that means you use the same cleaning rag for 3 bathrooms, and for the guest, that's the best case scenario. I know girls who would do 12 rooms or more with 2 rags, bathroom and not bathroom. Nobody gave a fuck. The goal was to remove all traces of the last guest and make it smell nice. It was the most disgusting and demeaning job I've ever had. It's interesting to hear about the realities of hotel cleaning. The details really show how hygiene practices vary. Using the same rag for multiple tasks sounds pretty risky. It makes sense why someone would be cautious about the cleanliness of their space. Definitely gives a different perspective on staying in hotels. It sounds like a tough job for sure. Not really a secret, but I found it interesting from BSing with the waiter on my cruise. If you're eating in the dining room, the kitchen is set up, so for the first 15-ish minutes the cooks are all turning out various appetizers, salads, and soups. So Chef 1, 2, and 3 are all making shrimp cocktail after shrimp cocktail and throwing it on the line. Chef 4, 5, 6 are making the escargot, etc. Your server takes your order and starts grabbing items off the line. After the 15 minutes are up, the cooks switch the line over to entree production. Same process repeats. The problem is when you order an appetizer, salad, or soup after your entree or after the line has swapped over. It messes up the flow, and they have a smaller number of cooks available to make any of those out-of-order items. That's a neat behind-the-scenes look at how cruise dining works. It's interesting how they time everything to ensure smooth service. Ordering out of sequence seems like it can really mess things up for the kitchen. It makes sense that sticking to the flow improves efficiency. It's nice to know there's a system in place to handle all those dishes during service. Just a little insight into the restaurant world. Just like airlines, hotels purposefully oversell. The hotel will purposefully sell more rooms than it has and banks on cancellations/no-shows. It's very possible at any given time that you could show up with a reservation and be walked to another property where the hotel will then pay for your room at another location. Might sound like a sweet deal if you're traveling for leisure, but it's a huge pain in the ass if your company is footing the bill and you've been traveling all day and just want to climb into a bed. Yeah, hotels do that. They sell more rooms than available and hope for cancellations. It can be a hassle if you show up and get moved. For leisure travelers, it might be fine, but for business trips, it's annoying. After a long day of travel, just wanting a bed should be simple. It's kind of messed up how they operate. I worked as a room service attendant in a 3-star hotel. Nothing too crazy, but boy were there some crazy stories. I worked with a woman at front desk who had been doing night shifts for over 30 years. One day I asked her a question similar to yours. What can you not tell me about this place? What are the secrets? What's something that would freak me out? She knew every single room where someone had died. She knew how they died, when, what time of day. Everything. She never forgot. She's obviously not allowed to tell customers this information, but boy, it was fascinating. That's an interesting job with some unexpected stories. Knowing all about the rooms where something happened adds a different layer to the work. It's wild to think someone could keep track of all that for so long. Definitely makes you wonder about the history of places we often take for granted. It's a reminder that hotels have their own hidden narratives. Former pets hotel worker here. Day camp makes your dog worse. They may be really well behaved when you start coming, but there are some asshole dogs there and your dog will pick up bad habits, eating shit, digging in the water bowl, etc. That being said, your dog is still a dog. Don't get upset if you see your dog getting humped by another dog or if they're doing the humping. It's normal and never sexual. Intact males aren't even allowed in day camp for this reason. Once had a woman freak out when she brought her Yorkie to try day camp. First thing the dog did was lick the piss off another one's dick. She never brought her dog back. Kind of an overreaction. First off, working at a pet's hotel must have some wild moments. Day camp can definitely bring out some bad behaviors in dogs. It's a mixed bag, really. The humping thing is pretty common, and people can be sensitive about it. That Yorkie incident seems a little extreme, though. Some people just don't handle that stuff well. Overall, it's all part of dog interactions, I guess. A lot of resort/cruise ships have a hierarchy or maybe caste system of employees. I went to a group interview for a resort that had child summer camp type activities. This was relayed to me by people who had done it before. At the top of the heap were the Americans, Aussies, Kiwis. They had better rooms, better days off, more perks, such as being allowed in guest areas of the resort. Then came Western Europeans who spoke English. All the Western Europeans spoke English. then Eastern Europeans who spoke English, then Eastern Europeans, then anyone who was not white. The people I interviewed with said the summer camp type jobs are the best jobs. Kids get dropped off after breakfast and picked up by cocktail hour. The nights are yours, where if you work the desk, you can be stuck there at 3 a.m. There's definitely a hierarchy at play in those resort jobs. The perks seem to favor certain groups, and it's interesting how roles are spread out based on nationality. The summer camp roles sound appealing since you have free time after the kids are gone. But being stuck at the desk overnight? That's a tough deal. Overall, it paints a clear picture of how these places operate behind the scenes.